what I wanted to do today is actually to look at, not rather than the parsha, but just look a little bit at Tzom Geldalia. We have this fast that we fast every year after Yom Kippur, and just get a little bit of a perspective on it for a few minutes, just to understand a little bit deeper who Gedalia was, what he did, where he came from. And when we look at the story, we'll begin to understand it, and perhaps begin to actually understand what is that we have to take out of it, perhaps in a deeper way. So let's begin just with a little bit of the background to the story. So the background of the story really begins in it's told in through the Navi Yirmiyahu. It's in Malachim as well, but if we look at the story in Yirmiyahu, so we understand that Nevu Zardan was the chief of the Rava Tabachim. He was the chief of the guards. He's the big macha of the representing the Babylonians at that time. So he comes and he appoints this person called Gedalia, the son of Achikam, and Gedalia becomes the governor of that area of Eretz Israel, representing the Babylonians, and his whole thing is just to make sure that he manages what's going to be happening in the land of Israel at that time. So the prophet says, "Vayavo Yirmiyahu Gedalia ben Achikam." So Yirmiyahu comes to Gedalia, and he's at a place called Mitzpah, and he stays with him. Everybody's talking about things, and they hear that the king of Gedalia, the king of Babel, that put Gedalia in charge of the region, and really what they did is what happened? He put them in charge of the women and the men and the children and all those, the poorest of the land, the most like in Israel called miskanim, like the bottom rung of society. Those who had not been exiled to Babylon. So now there was an opportunity. Whatever level of strata they were in society, there were still people in Eretz Israel. There were Jews in Eretz Israel, and here was a Jew, like Gedalia, who was given the opportunity to not to build the space, but just to ensure that it maintained a certain level of Jewishness in the land of Israel. And what happens is that all these people who hear what's going on, they come together. And they come to where Gedalia is. And who is there? So it says that it was Yishmael ben Netanyahu, Yochanan v'Yonatan ben Kerach v'Sariah ben Tanchumet u'benei ha'netofatai v'Yiznayahu ben Machatai Hema and Vanshem. So all these people come together. And Gedalia sees them, Vayishavalem Gedalia. And Gedalia swears to them and he says to them, don't worry about serving the Chaldeans who are now in charge. Just stick around. Let's serve the king, and we'll stay, and we'll be okay in Eretz Israel. And I'll go before all the Kasdim, and I'll serve them, and I'll be the interface between you. You go and do what you have to do, and everything will be okay. And it seemed to be that it was going to be okay, because it explains that that the Jews started coming from all the places where they had run away. Now at least they were settled. They didn't have to worry about getting hurt and about getting damaged, and about worrying about that there was going to be further destruction and further exile. And the Yochanan, the son of Karech, who's one of the officers in that area, comes and says to Gedalia, you need to know, Gedalia, that there's a man called Yishmael ben Netanyahu. Yishmael ben Netanyahu was from royal stock, and he wasn't very happy that Gedalia had become the governor of the place. So he says to him, you must understand that the king of Ammon and Yishmael have come together and made a little of a pact, and Yishmael is going to come and kill you. And Gedalia says, Gedalia ben Achikam. And Gedalia said, wasn't going to, he refused to believe them. And he says to them, in actual fact, Vayomer Gedalia ben Achikam el Yochanan ben Kareach, Al ta'aseh et hadavar hazeh, ki sheker ata dover al Yishmael. Says, you don't speak like that. You're speaking lies about Yishmael. In other words, he completely fobbed off this rumor that he heard. And in fobbing off the rumor that he heard, this carries on the story in Yirmiyahu that in the 7th month, which is the Chodesh Hashvi, which is the month of Tishrei, by Yishmael ben Netanyahu ben Elishama mizer HaMelucha, that Yishmael, the son of Netanyahu, comes to with 10 men to where Gedalia is in Mitzpah, and they sit together and they eat together. And you know, when you eat together, they ate bread together. It seemed to be a very nice thing, and it was clear that they were, well, it was clear to Gedalia at least, that any animosity that was felt had actually been dissipated. But then Vayakam Ishmael, and then Yishmael and the 10 people that he's with, Vayakwit Gedalia ben Achikam ben Shafan b'cheret, they kill him. They kill the person, and the way the Navi describes it, the man that had been set up by the king. So they put up this man who'd been set up by the king, they kill him, and then they kill a whole bunch of other people, and it's a great tragedy. Because at this point in time, there's clearly an uprising against the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and because there's an uprising now, so then everything falls apart, and there's no longer this stability in the land of Israel. The Mesilas Yesharim points out something amazing. The Mesilas Yesharim is speaking about the trait of piety of Hasidus, and the trait of piety, he says, of Hasidus is an inyan ikarim od ma'od. It's a fundamental thing, and the reality is that it's the most difficult to think, because it requires for a person to be a real chassid. I'm not talking about the chassidim. I'm talking about a chassid on a musar level. That a person who wants to try and really achieve great heights in avodas Hashem, such a person needs to know that there'll always be a yetzer hara. And the yetzer hara is very dangerous at this point in time. And because it's so subtle to be a chassid, one has to be so in touch with what's really going on, and you can't be too much of a chassid. And what he says is that's the story of Gedalia. He says one has to be careful. He says that person needs to understand that one should not judge the matters of chassidus superficially. One must examine and contemplate the full extent of where the future consequences of the deed leads. For sometimes the deed itself may appear to be good, but its consequences are evil. Therefore, one should abstain. And who's the example? The example is Gedalia. Gedalia is clear that he was a great chassid. He was such a big tzaddik, such an incredible human being. He didn't want to judge this Yishmael ben Netanya negatively. He didn't want to accept the report from Yochanan ben Kareach. So he tells him that he's lying. What results from this is that he was murdered. The Jews go into exile, and the last ember of any establishment of people in the land of Israel is completely extinguished. In fact, all those people who died as a result of the murder, the Torah says, and it's brought down in the Gemara in Nida, it says, it says that it's talking about the bodies of all the people who were killed by Gedalia. But the Gemara there asks, a Gemara in Nida says, what are you talking about? He didn't do anything. Gedalia didn't kill anybody. It was Ishmael who killed everybody. The Gemara says, no. You can't say that. The thing is that even though Gedalia was such a big tzaddik, says the Gemara, V'chi Gedalia hargan, v'alo Ishmael hargan. He should have thought carefully about the rumor that Yochanan ben Kareach brought to him, lo chash, and he didn't worry about it. The Torah considers as if he's the one who killed them. So on that, Rava says, the Gemara says, Hai lishna bisha, that when it's concerning lishna bishna is lashon hara. Af al pi de la kabuli loimi bai, even though you're not supposed to accept it, this is the subtlety. Meichush loimi bai. You do need to be concerned about it. So a person doesn't have to accept the lashon hara that they receive. A person doesn't have to accept warnings about people. They don't have to accept them and say that that's gospel truth. However, it's clear from the Gemara what we do have to do is that we do have to be aware that the fact is that a person is telling this, that somebody wants to do something negative to them. Nonetheless, a person should still be aware of that. And whilst they don't have to accept it, they can still be a little bit suspect of that person. Doesn't mean that they have to say that they're evil, just to be a little bit more, so I suppose, suspicious of them, as I said. So out of this here, we see that the Gemara takes this concept of Gedalia, who died at the hands of this person. You take this concept and it turns it into an unbelievably important learning. And the unbelievably important learning for us is twofold. Number one is that when a person comes with you and gives you certain information about what another person is feeling about you, one's not allowed to believe it. You're not allowed to believe it. You're not allowed to say that's the truth and make sure and therefore act in that way. However, at the same time, it's kind of like when there's smoke, there's fire. What the Gemara is saying to us is that we have to be aware that if people are speaking about people in that way, then it must be that there's a certain thing that we need to be concerned about. So what's that got to do with Yom Kippur? What's that got to do with Aseret Yemei Tshuva? What's it got to do with everything? And so I suppose the thing that we can learn out of it is that there's a subtlety in everything. And sometimes we don't really understand those subtleties. Sometimes we don't really get those subtleties. But when we go before the Ribono Shel Olam, those subtleties are really what's important. Our intentions are important. The way we do things are important. And certainly the way we engage with others becomes an important thing. We build around us support systems and groups of people. But if we're not going to believe them because we think we're such tzaddikim, being a tzaddik doesn't mean that you don't use your seichel. The most powerful thing that we have is our da'at, and that really is what we learn through Adam and through Chava. That da'at is the most important thing that we can use in our service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not always of the heart. Obviously, it has to be a heartfelt, emotional space, but at the same time, it has to be a space of seichel. And so, therefore, Gedalia, who didn't use that seichel, who didn't think that it was that it was something to worry about, that somebody was telling him what he called malicious speech, nonetheless. The Gemara says one has to be concerned about it because of the harm that might come from it, and that harm is not only personal. Some of the commentaries explain that the harm could be not only harm to you, but the fact is that people are talking about a person in a certain way. One must be aware of that, and one must take that with them and to make sure that nobody else gets hurt. Because at the end of the day, our concept of arevut, our concept of responsibility for one another, is to ensure not only the clear things that we know we shouldn't be, that we should make sure that people are okay, and that we assist them and all the things that they need assistance, but at the same time, when there is a call, a voice of certain things that may be negative about it happening to another person, we have to go out of our way to ensure that those negative things don't happen. That's part of our arevut. That's part of our process of Yom Kippur, because on Yom Kippur, as we know, the Kohen Gadol stands before the Ribono Shel Olam and asks for kapara for three things: for himself, for his family, for all the Kohanim, and on behalf of all Am Yisrael. And so we too, in our lives, as we come every morning and we start to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should also feel that sense of responsibility for ourselves, for sure, but for our families, of course, for all those closest to us, of course, but also for all